Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Weisslogel. This presentation will give you a short guide to arguments. It will show you a few tips to keep in mind in understanding the arguments of others and in making our own arguments better. So here we go. Arguments are made up of propositions. The proposition is the basic unit of thought. A proposition comes in the form of indicative or declarative sentences. A proposition is that which says something about something. A proposition is evaluated in its quality as being either true or false. So, for instance, cows is not a proposition, but all cows are brown is a proposition. It is a thought. It is saying something that they're brown about something, cows. And either that's true or it's false. Now it happens to be false. Not all cows are brown. Right? That's a proposition, and arguments are made up of propositions. An argument is a connected series of statements or propositions intended to establish another proposition or another statement. This definition was given correctly in a great sketch by Monty Python called The Argument Clinic, and you can, in the PowerPoint version of this, you can click on that link and you can have a look at it. However, the argument you see in that argument sketch is not really an argument as the client in it rightly says. The definition of an argument as a connected series of statements intended to establish a proposition shows that there is a special relationship between the propositions. It's a connected series on the one hand, and that series is connected to the proposition that you're intended to establish or to prove or to demonstrate. The proposition statement to be established is called the conclusion of the argument, and the propositions or statements that make up the connected series are called the premises. The premises, and that word is premise, not promise, taken either singularly or together, are the reasons for the conclusion. They're the reasons why you think the conclusion is true. You tell the goodness of an argument in a couple of different ways. A good argument is both valid and sound. The definition of a valid argument is an argument is valid if and only if it is impossible for the premises to all be true and the conclusion to be false at the same time. The definition of a sound argument has two characteristics. First, the argument must be valid, and second, all the premises have to be in fact true. You see the difference? Validity says that if the premises are all true, the conclusion has to be true. It doesn't tell you whether they're true. A sound argument says it's a valid argument and all the premises are true. So if all the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true as well. Note, arguments are not true or false. That's the way we evaluate propositions. All cows are brown. False. Arguments are first either valid or invalid, and then second, if they are valid, we have to determine whether they're sound or not. So let's go back to that definition again. An argument is valid if and only if it is impossible for the premises to all be true and the conclusion be false at the same time. So put it another way, if all the premises can be true and yet the conclusion can still be false at the same time, then the argument is invalid. Right? Note that I wrote can be true and can be false when evaluating an argument for validity. We're interested in possibility, not the actuality. We just want to know if it's possible. If the premises are all true, is it possible for the conclusion to still be false? I don't know if the premises are really true. I just want to know if they were all true, would it still be possible for the conclusion to be false? If it is possible, the argument's invalid. So here's an example of an argument in ordinary language. Dave likes the Phillies. All people who like the Phillies like baseball, therefore Dave likes baseball. Now, for some reason, we need to give an argument that establishes that Dave likes baseball. We know that he likes the Phillies, and we know that everyone who likes the Phillies likes baseball. These are our reasons for thinking that Dave likes baseball. The word therefore is an example of a conclusion indicator. Whatever proposition follows the word therefore will be a conclusion. Other conclusion indicators are so, thus, in conclusion, hence, ergo, and sometimes then. Let me just point that out. If I say, first I brushed my teeth, then I shaved, that's not an argument. That's a temporal series, a time series. First one thing happens, then another thing happens. I'm not saying brushing my teeth is the reason for shaving. No. So in that case, the word then is not a conclusion indicator. But if I say, all people who brush their teeth shave, I brush my teeth, then therefore, then in that case I shaved, the word then is trying to show me that there's a conclusion. Notice I tried to throw in a better conclusion indicator, the classic therefore. Okay, so there are also premise indicators, because, in as much as, given that, and so on. And again, since. And sometimes since is a reason. Since every time I brushed my teeth, I shaved, and I brushed my teeth, I shaved, okay, then it's part of the premises. But sometimes it's, well, I've been using this Macintosh computer since I got it in 2009. Well, since is just a time thing. I'm not using it because of something in 2009. I'm using it because I'm using it. But that's the time at which I acquired the computer. So just be a little careful about since and then. Right, so whatever follows a premise indicator is going to be one of the reasons for thinking that your conclusion is true. Whatever follows a conclusion indicator is your conclusion. There are many ways to write the same argument in ordinary language. So we could have written this argument this way. Dave likes baseball because everyone who likes the Phillies likes baseball, and Dave likes the Phillies. Or we could have written it this way. Since Dave likes the Phillies, Dave likes baseball because everyone who likes the Phillies likes baseball. Or we could have written the same argument this way. Dave likes the Phillies, and all people who like the Phillies like baseball, so Dave likes baseball. Notice that the conclusion, which is Dave likes baseball, can come at the beginning, the middle, or the end of the argument in ordinary language. And you can see on the presentation that I've indicated the premises in red, and I indicated the premise indicators in red and the conclusion indicators in blue. Okay? So same argument can be written or spoken many different ways in ordinary language. But when evaluating arguments for validity and soundness, it is helpful to put the argument in what we call standard form. So here's our same argument, just heard it 3 different ways, in standard form. First premise, Dave likes the Phillies. Second premise, everyone who likes the Phillies likes baseball. And then a line, and then conclusion, Dave likes baseball. Okay? Everything above the line is a premise, and then the proposition below the line is the conclusion. You can read the line itself as therefore. So Dave likes the Phillies, everyone who likes the Phillies likes baseball, therefore Dave likes baseball. No matter how this argument was written in ordinary language, the argument has the same standard form. However, it is possible to reverse the order of the premises without affecting the argument in any way. The point is to get all the premises above the line and the conclusion below the line. Now it's easier to evaluate the argument for validity and soundness. So for validity, ask yourself whether it's possible for premise 1 and premise 2 to be true, both be true, and the conclusion to be false at the same time. If it is possible for that to happen, the argument is valid. However, you can see in this case that if premise 1 and premise 2 were really true together, it would be impossible for the conclusion to be false. So this is a valid argument. If it's really true that Dave likes the Phillies and everyone who likes the Phillies likes baseball, it has to be true that Dave likes baseball. No exceptions. Now that you only have to understand the basic, notice that you only have to understand the basic meanings of the words and how to speak English in order to make the assessment about validity. I don't know, Dave. I don't even know if he exists. I don't know whether it's really true that everyone who likes the Phillies likes baseball. Maybe there are people who like the Phillies because they look nice in their uniforms, because they have nice personalities, but they don't really like the game of baseball at all. But this doesn't matter when you're checking for validity. All you have to determine is whether the conclusion could be false while all of the premises are true. In this case, they could not be, so the argument is valid. Another way to think about this is to assume the premises are all true, even if you know that they aren't true. Assume that they're true, and then ask yourself, could the conclusion be false at the same time, even if you happen to know the conclusion's true? We'll have more examples. All right? But now let's talk about soundness. Now let's know that in this argument that we've been looking at, we know that the argument is valid. But you do not know for sure if Dave really likes the Phillies. Whereas the validity just asks about the possibilities, soundness asks about the reality of the situation. We know that if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. But are the premises true? The only way to find out that is to examine the world. Logic by itself can't tell you. whether Dave likes the Phillies. You have to find out who Dave is and ask him whether he likes the Phillies. So the only arguments that should convince us of anything at all are sound arguments. Valid arguments by themselves do not tell us anything about the real world. You still have to find out the truth of the propositions that make up the premises in order to determine whether you should be convinced or not by the conclusion. So here's another argument. Is this one valid? Roses are red, violets are blue, therefore sugar is sweet. Now don't be fooled by the fact that both of the premises and the conclusion all happen to be in fact true. That doesn't matter. To assess validity, ask yourself, assuming the premises are true, don't worry whether they really are true, just assume they're true, would it be possible for the conclusion to be false? Now your mind will want to tell you that it's impossible for the proposition sugar is sweet to be false. All sugar is sweet, isn't it? Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe there is some chemical compound identical to sugar that is not sweet. I don't know. That's not the point. We're trying to find out if the premises completely determine that the conclusion is true. Do they? No. They don't seem to be related to each other or to the conclusion at all. Yes, all the propositions are true, but where's that connected series of statements? Where's the connection? So this argument is invalid. If roses really are red and violets really are blue, it would still be possible for sugar not to be sweet, at least in some world, because there's no connection between these propositions. Look at this argument. Roses are plaid, violets are made of solid steel, therefore sugar is sweet. It's easier to see that this argument is invalid, even though your mind wants to tell you that the conclusion has to be true. Remember, validity is about the relationship between the propositions and not about what's going on with the world. That's where soundness comes in. Here's another argument. Barack has big ears. Elephants have big ears. Therefore, Barack is an elephant. Okay, well, these propositions seem more related to each other than those in the previous two arguments. How to find out if it's valid? Assume the two premises are true, whether or not they are, just assume they are, then ask, given that they are true, is there any way at all that the conclusion could be false? Okay, so let's say Barack has big ears, and let's say that elephants have big ears. Do those two facts make it necessary that Barack is an elephant? Of course not. Maybe Barack we were talking about really is an elephant, but it could also be that Barack we were talking about is a president of a major country who just happens to have big ears, or Barack could be my pet hamster who also has big ears. In any case, Barack's not being an elephant would not contradict our knowing that Barack has big ears and that elephants have big ears, so we know that it's possible for the conclusion to be false while the premises are true. So that last argument was invalid, but what about this one? The 2008 Summer Olympics were held in London. Any Olympics held in London were held in England. Therefore, the 2008 Summer Olympics were held in England. How about this one? Is this valid? Don't be fooled by the fact that one of the premises and the conclusion happen to be, in fact, false. Well, they were false. The 2008 Summer Olympics were held not in London, but in Beijing. The conclusion, the 2008 Summer Olympics were held in England, that's not true. They were held in China. But don't worry about that. It doesn't matter when assessing validity. You just assume the premises are true. Don't worry about whether they really are. Just assume they were true and ask, would it be possible for the conclusion to be false? In this case, if the premises were really true, they aren't. But if they were really true, it would be impossible for the conclusion to be false. That makes this a valid argument. The conclusion is supported by the premises or the reasons. But note, this isn't a sound argument because the premises are not all true. The first premise isn't true. So we don't have to accept the conclusion. We just have to look at the relationship between the propositions in the premises and the conclusion. If the premises were true, the conclusion would have to be true. That makes this a valid argument. Take a look at this one. One way to show that an argument is invalid is to produce a counterexample to the conclusion, assuming that the premises are true. So look at this. All professors like books. Hillary likes books. Therefore, Hillary is a professor. Well, for instance, could Hillary like books but not be a professor? Sure, she could be the Secretary of State or an accountant or an astronaut or anything else besides a professor. It would still be true that she likes books and that all professors like books. But if you cannot think of a counterexample that would still allow you to assume the premises are true, your argument would be valid. This argument is invalid. Compare these two arguments. The first one says, all professors like books. Hillary likes books, therefore Hillary is a professor. That's the one we just saw. Look at this. The other one, compare it to this. All professors like books. Hillary is a professor, therefore Hillary likes books. The first argument can have a counterexample. Hillary could be a book-loving astronaut, so the argument is invalid. But the second one doesn't admit of any counterexamples. If Hillary is a professor and every professor really likes books, then Hillary likes books. There's no way around it, and that second argument is valid. So in this course, we will regularly be evaluating arguments for their validity as well as their soundness. We want to look at the reasoning of others, and we want to make sure that our own reasoning is good as well. Also, course papers and forum contributions will require you to make valid arguments, preferably sound arguments, for the views that you put forth. You will be required to try to give good reasons, sufficient reasons for your views. We might argue over the soundness of arguments, whether the premises we assert are really true, but we cannot argue about the validity of arguments. Arguments are valid or not as a matter of logic. So first we want to get the right structure, the right form for our reasoning process. That's a matter of logic. We can be clear about that. And after that, we could debate about whether the world is a certain way or not. We could debate about the soundness of our arguments.